All right. All right. Is everyone good? Everyone?
Very much so. Yeah.
All right. Awesome. All right. Okay. So hello, everybody. Welcome to this live stream. My name is Emily. I go by the alias Emiloid here on the internet. I'm a booktuber, and I talk about books, and sometimes I yell about films on this channel. And I was very kindly asked by Claire here to host this CoNZealand Fringe panel about fan criticism, critique in the digital age. And we have an awesome panel here today. So I hope on your way in or out, you'll also take the time to subscribe to my channel and check out my videos as well. So shall I hand it over to you, Brent? You're the mod here, and let's take it away.
Yep. Okay, so I have a quick disclaimer, and then we'll get to the panel. So CoNZealand Fringe has been created as a complementary programming series to the annual science fiction convention Worldcon. All our live streams take place outside core CoNZealand programming hours and are not official CoNZealand programming items. CoNZealand Fringe is not endorsed by CoNZealand. So big disclaimer out the way. This panel is entitled Tubes, Pods, Tweets, and Blogs, Fan Criticism in the Digital Age. I am Brent Lambert, social media manager and reviews editor for Fire Literary Magazine. So just wanted to get the pronunciation right for the whole world. All right, so now that little bit of bitterness is out the way, I will allow each of our panelists to introduce themselves. Foz, we can start with you.
Okay, hi, I'm Meadows. I'm an Australian currently resident in the US. I am a author, blogger, fan writer. I won a Hugo for fan writing last year, which was kind of cool. And generally, I yell about stuff on the internet.
All right, Leslie, we'll let you go next.
Hi, well, I'm Leslie. I'm an English film blogger, writer, podcaster, photographer, just a kind of media node, so to speak. And that's you can find me on Afro Film Viewer like nearly everywhere. If you Google that name, it's usually me. So
okay. All right, Claire, we will let you go. I'm sure you have a grievance to air, much like myself.
Hi, I am Hugo Award loser Claire Rousseau. I have a booktube channel. It's a fan cast. Fancasts. It has video now. And also, fire's not hard to say. Like, I'm very white. It's not that hard.
Okay, Paul, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Paul Weimer. I'm a fan writer. I'm also a photographer, but I'm here because I write book reviews for places like Nerds of a Feather, Tour.com, and other places. And I'm also a Hugo loser like Claire.
Yay, what a cool club.
Woo. All right, so Hugo disasters aside, we are going to actually talk about some really interesting stuff today, just because you guys have all been doing some great work in terms of like criticism and fandom and just how in the digital age, how does that look? So I guess my first question would be, if someone wanted to newly enter the space of fan criticism, what considerations would you tell them to keep in mind to have like a successful, fulfilling experience in it? I will start with Claire.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because I'm not sure that everything that I do on BookTube I would qualify as fan criticism. Some of what I do I certainly think of as fan criticism, but not absolutely everything. You know, I do a lot of things that's like kind of like hyping books and, you know, talking about stuff that's not out yet, so I've not read it. So, you know, it's not really criticism, but there's also a bunch of reviewing and a bunch of talking about news that obviously will have a slant, and that counts as, you know, criticism, but it's a small part, you know, but I just, it's my favorite part, so.
And you do it well. All right, so I will go to Paul next. How would you answer this one?
I think, and I'm going to say this probably a lot during this panel. The key for someone wanting to get into this is to read widely and diversely. Expand your horizons, expand what you read, expand the authors, expand the types of media you consume. That makes you a better critic of the stuff that you might think of as your core. If you look at stuff outside of your core, you can see how that reacts to your own, and you can make connections, you can make parallels, you can react and look at the stuff you love in a new way and make you a stronger reviewer. Since I've been trying to expand my reading widely over the last few years, I've learned to love the stuff I love more and learn to love and understand other things and improve my criticism and fan reviewing game immensely by trying to read as broadly and deeply as possible.
I love that answer. That's great. So I will go to Leslie because I know you do more films, so I'd be interested to hear how you would answer.
Yeah. So I kind of just will elaborate on what Paul said there. For me, it's about understanding your voice. And if anyone wanted to get into the idea of fan criticism in that way, it's understanding your voice and realizing it's not just about what you like and what you dislike. It's about trying to build and create. How can I say this? It's trying to build and create on your opinion as more than just like really straight, rigid, binary thing, so to speak. So it is about kind of it is about reading and writing widely. And for me, one of the biggest things I found was, as a film, someone who writes a lot about film and talks about film on various podcasts, the first thing I had to do was not watch films, so to speak. It was I took up a different hobby, and it was about looking and building my kind of visual language, and then I had to look into talking to people that have very different views on my own personal views, and looking at things like politics, and just trying to find a way of building and establishing that voice and understanding who you are before you kind of just rush into it and just go, this is what I'm doing, and yada yada yada. I mean, that's the only way I could it's the only way I can really kind of say, but that's me.
No, I mean, that makes sense. Like, finding your voice is probably an important part of like any creative process. So yeah, that makes total sense. Foz, I will finish off with you.
So I think the main thing I'd say is be prepared to be wrong sometimes, because the internet is a discursive or a discussion medium, not a broadcast medium, and it's interactive. So when I first started sort of yelling on the internet, it was much more disparate, like it would be on a blog and it would be, so I didn't have any readers really when I started. It was just something that I built. A readership is something I built up very gradually. And part of that was because there wasn't really Twitter, there wasn't social media. You just sort of started having an opinion because you had an opinion. And by the time I'd sort of gotten to a point where I had an audience and I was aware of people reading me, I'd kind of learned, okay, sometimes I'm going to say something and I'm not going to be correct and there's going to be an argument about it, or I'm going to think about it and come back to it later. But I think particularly now, people can often get hung up on the idea that sometimes even just in the effort of not wanting to be problematic and people just trying to do their best, they can get paradoxically caught up in the idea that because they're trying, what they're saying must be correct. And a lot of people don't want to be confrontational. They don't want to have an argument. They don't want to be argued with, but it's kind of inevitable if you're going to have an opinion on the internet where other people can see you, and it's going to be about something that other people care about. Sooner or later, you're going to be argued with, or somebody is going to disagree with you, and it might be polite disagreement, it might be just casual disagreement, or it might be vehement. But you have to be prepared to think, how much do I want to engage with that? Even if I think about what this other person has said about my criticism, do I need to engage with them? And I think, it's a lot of people have this reflexive thing that if somebody says you're wrong about this, oh, I must instantly be wrong, and they don't want to think about it. They just want to do the right thing to the exclusion of having critical thought, which is kind of, to me, antithetical to the idea of criticism, in a sense where you're just, oh, I'm sorry, I did the wrong thing. And like sometimes that reflex can be useful if somebody said, oh, you've done something problematic, or this is a bit racist, or this is a bit whatever. And so the reflex to say, oh, right, I'm sorry, I'll fix that is good, but you still need to actually think about it and not just uncritically accept everything that's said to you, so that you're actually understanding what the issue is, if there is one, or alternatively, if it's a point where you can actually have two different opinions coexisting at the same time, you can go, actually, no, I respect that you have a different take on this to me, but mine is still valid. You actually need to continue to think critically about the criticism that your criticism receives.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Very true.
Yeah. Paul, did you want to add something? It seems like
No, I was just agreeing.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, no, absolutely, that's a great thought. All right, so moving on to the next thing. So, social media, right? Social media has kind of cultivated this environment where, you know, we have media outlets that seem to just kind of be in a race with each other to be the first to provide a review or a critical critique of like a new media item or whatever. Do you feel the need to try and do that in your own work? And what do you feel like are the pros and cons of that approach of trying to be first in when the new media item comes out? I'll start with Paul.
Okay, so I do get, well, until the pandemic, I was getting tons of review copies in the mail every week. It was ridiculous at some point. Not as many as some, but enough. Now I have to do a little more engagement with publishers and publicists to get them. I like to get stuff early because I like to talk about and think about stuff that's not come out yet, so that if it's really good, it's really something that pushes the genre, pushes a subgenre, pushes a new author whose voice I think wants to be here, then I can talk about it and I can get that voice out there in front. I'm not in a race with other bloggers, other reviewers to try to get that review first. I feel like I'm trying to help uplift the boats of what's coming on the horizon. I think there's a value since we're in a tsunami of so many choices, so many things, so many things we could buy, read, and consume, that to get on top of what someone might actually want to read, something I think might be important or valuable or strong, and put a light there like, hey, this is coming out in 2 months. You might want to read this. Here's why. And that's the way I feel about it. I like to be that signal light to boost others and to point the way towards stuff coming in the future. So I really value being able to read stuff in advance if I can.
All right, yeah, that's good thoughts. Oh, Foz, I will go to you on this one because I know you do a whole lot of reviewing in your stuff too.
I think mainly, so there is some paid reviewing that I do or have done for Strange Horizons, and in that case, it's sort of like, reading a book, getting it out there. Particularly if it's a newer thing, you're trying to get the review out in a good window for the book itself to benefit from it if it's a good review, or to join the conversation if it's a more critical one. But generally for me, if I consume something or I read about an incident happening in fandom, and I get a little itch in my brain going, someone is wrong on the internet, and I have to know about it immediately, that's the immediacy that comes to me, is that when I have the opinion, I want to get it off my head, because the writing becomes kind of cathartic in that sense. But otherwise, I don't have that sort of drive to be first with it, because sometimes I'll be talking about something that's an older show or an older book, and it's just that I've discovered it now. And I think that's one of the things that's so wonderful about fandom, is people can be discovering things at any time. So there are times that I'll have reviews that I wrote several years ago, but I'll still get comments on them every once in a while because somebody has just discovered that book series and they were looking for an opinion about it, and my review of it came up. So it's not sort of that rush. I think it's kind of like, yes, if there's a thing happening, an event happening, that's more like if there's an ongoing clusterfuck in fandom, or there's an ongoing thing in fandom and I have an opinion about it, then that's when I have that drive to participate in the conversation as it's happening. But with works, it's more the only immediacy is just wanting to get it out. Otherwise, I just kind of want to. I'm talking to myself in a strange way. Like, I'm conscious of the fact that I have an audience, but generally speaking, if I'm taking the time to sit down and write something, it's because I've got the little gremlin in my brain yelling that I need to have thoughts about a thing, and not because I'm thinking, oh, this has to be new and immediate.
Yeah, well, I look forward to your thoughts on our current clusterfuck. So, so Claire, I will go to you next.
Sorry, did you say me?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Well, the thing with social media is that it helps and it doesn't help in a lot of senses. Like, you know, obviously the basis of the question, the immediacy of wanting to do things, like, yeah, we do want to react to things quickly, but I think it can bite us because, you know, you need to make sure that you know what you're saying and, you know, that you are actually expressing yourself the way you want to, and that you haven't rushed in a way that means, you know, you're putting something out that's not quite as good as you would otherwise do. That's kind of, you know, one of my concerns, is to make sure that I'm not kind of rushing to an answer and then, you know, a couple days later going like, you know, I wish I'd been more nuanced or whatever. I'm not talking about the current situation because I don't think I need to be more nuanced about that. But, you know, just in terms of reviewing, you know, books, movies, whatever, especially there's a question in chat about from Sean about reviewing things outside our lived experiences. I think, you know, especially being able to take the time to like take in other point of views as well can be really, really helpful. I think a lot of people feel like afraid that they'll be influenced by what other people say. And I feel like you need to have confidence in your own voice, that that's not necessarily going to happen. And, you know, that you, that you will still have something worthwhile to bring to the table, even if you don't, even if you're not like the first out of the starting blocks. And even if you are taking into account other points of view, I think it's quite important to think, you know.
All right, yeah, Paul.
Yeah, I want to follow on that, because as if I find that someone has written a review of a book that I am about to read or I am reading, I won't read it because I am kind of a little concerned that I'm going to have my opinion shifted by what the reviewer is, especially if I really respect the reviewer and what they have to say. I don't want to have to disentangle my thoughts from their thoughts, especially if we're kind of simpatico. I'd like to have my own relatively unfiltered approach. And then later, afterwards, I will read their review and compare it to mine. It's like, okay, so this is what Claire liked. And I didn't realize what Claire said here. Well, but I can see that about that book. So after the fact, I'll look at what other people thought about the same book I did, but not beforehand, because I do want to have be able to present a experience that is mine and not subconsciously or accidentally stealing from you, because that would not be fair.
I think maybe it depends of like the type of person that I find, and I don't know if that makes me, I don't know what that says about me, but I oftentimes find that I find it easier to kind of respond to other people. You know, if I see an opinion, I'll kind of know, oh, I agree or I don't. I find that easy, and also I have confidence in my reaction to, you know, I don't know, if someone has a hot take about a thing, I often find myself fairly confident in my reaction on that. So I don't know if that's just maybe, you know, a different take personally that you have on how you do your work.
I think it's particularly valid. You have a strong central core for yourself. So you don't feel like that my review is going to completely bollocks yours. That's perfectly valid.
Okay, so Leslie, I'm gonna let you finish this one off. This was a good discussion.
Yeah, I don't like chiming in. I'm loving listening to all these other opinions, because it's interesting to kind of put yourself into a certain perspective. For me, I've never been that interested in being first, which is weird. I used to be a sprinter. And, I used to be quite good at it. For me, it's all about context and correlation, and the cream rising to the top. And one of the worst things I have found about social media and this culture of being first and hot takes and all this stuff is how, I wouldn't say it's misinformation, but how so much stuff is wrong and unnuanced. And especially for me, when it comes to like writing in film, it's so interesting to watch a film like I'll just pick Jennifer's Body. And Jennifer's Body, when it first came out, and I remember writing about it and going, it wasn't that great. I wasn't that impressed with this aspect and this aspect and this aspect. And then watching, we've now gone 10 years, 12 years. I can't remember when it came out at this moment in time. And you've seen new voices look at that movie and going, oh, well, this is the angle to it. This is a reading to it. This is a feminist reading to it. This is a queer reading to it. This is so many different things to that film that someone like myself just missed. So being first has never really been a big thing for me, because I don't think people read into everything as well as they can when they're coming out to be first. I think it's just the rush to turn around and go, I've done this first. I'm the first person to do this, to get as many hits or clout or anything. For me, it's always about trying to find the context and correlation with things, especially with what I'm talking with what I do now in terms of writing. I write for a website called Set the Tape, and I find myself writing more about the older films. I mean, at this moment in time, I've got another Billy Wilder film to go and to review, and I'm finding it to be so freeing to have a look at this and look at the context of the culture back then and look at the culture now, and just writing at my own pace. The other thing is I'm a very, very slow writer. The problem, I have this thing on where I really want to try and get the right things on the page, as so to speak. And the thing that really, I think, frustrates me is this kind of rush to try and deliver something out as quickly as possible, because there is so much content and everyone gets lost. I mean, whoever comes first these days usually gets lost in this mire of stuff. Whereas if you can bring out something nuanced and interesting and with some real value, that usually takes time. And not only it takes time, it takes like multiple viewings of something or multiple readings of something. I know a lot of the people here are more based in books, but because I'm more based in film. So what happens to me is I hate Bridget Jones' Diary, and I've watched that film 3 times. And the reason why I've watched that film 3 times is to try and gain more sense of the reading and try and gain more sense of other people's opinions and see where it actually lies in certain things. I mean, it's for me, it's always been a big thing for there was a website that called The Dissolve, which was a film website, which I absolutely loved. It came up with something, I think it was Nathan Rabin, or Rabin. I apologize if I get his name wrong, if he's watching. And he used to come up with something called Forgotbusters, where there was a whole bunch of movies that made a ton of money at the time, and then no one talks about them anymore. They just completely forgot about them, and he was delving into them and looking at them like such years on, and that was really interesting. And that's where I think some of the best criticism comes from, where you have that time to kind of slow down, have a look at something, and write at your own pace. I think it's been about 5 years since I've stopped writing about a lot of more modern movies, mostly because I find them boring. Not the films themselves, but I think the conversation around them boring. And they become more interesting 5 years down the line, 10 years down the line, when you can correlate and see what a body of work is doing. I mean, the big thing about criticism for me was always about looking at certain things and going, oh, hang on a minute, isn't there a body of work? Isn't there, he's doing one thing here and looking at it on a larger scale? I've always thought that to be the most important thing. So that again, it's just my opinion on it, but being first has never been interesting to me in terms of writing. I think you get a lot of hurried work that kind of gets lost in the mire.
Yeah. So something you said had like spurred a question in my head. I'm going to save it for later. So, something you said about time and like the putting it into the work. I'm definitely going to ask it later, but I'm going to go through what I got planned first. So,
cool.
In the same vein of like social media, so there used to be a distance between creators and their audience. We've seen that distance kind of shrink and become so much shorter. We have like snitch tagging. It's now part of the discourse, you know, authors expressing how they feel about being tagged in negative reviews or being attacked by trolls online for something they wrote and whatnot. So why do you believe some of these boundaries have blurred, and what can be done to create better interactions between all parties involved? I want to start with Foz because I feel like they have talked about this topic before.
Yeah, I mean, I think like the etiquette around reviewing and interacting with creators and things like that, it's something that we've kind of had to make up as we go along. So I remember a few years ago, there was a huge discourse around Goodreads and the use of Goodreads in particular, because it's kind of simultaneously a feature and a bug of Goodreads as a reviewing site, that if you're on there as an author, you will see the reviews that come in of your book, whether they're negative or positive. And the impulse, because you are also a legitimate user of the site and you can see these things coming up, is to react to what you see there. But then that becomes a very different thing where you're saying, okay, but the review isn't for the author. The review there is for the readers. And you would have some authors who would get very upset about the idea of having a bad review where they could see it because, that's negatively impacting me and somebody is wrong on the internet and I want to respond. And it's a question about who the conversation is for. And that's something that makes Goodreads still a confused site in that matter, because everybody is there legitimately, and it can be distressing if you're using that site as an author to suddenly come across, to check your own books and come across, oh, here's a negative review, and feel like, oh, they got something wrong in that. And that's actually like a factually incorrect statement about what happens in the book. You know, they've got a character's arc wrong or they've misinterpreted something, but it's not for you to engage on that level. But then you've got the counterpoint where you'll get snitch tagged or you'll get tagged in on Twitter to a negative review because people, I mean, there's a range of reasons why it can happen. I mean, I'm certain that I've probably done it in the past, just thoughtlessly thinking, oh, I've reviewed this thing and I vaguely know the author and it's mostly a positive review, even if it has some criticism in it. So I'll tag that person in. But you don't necessarily know, like they might not want to see that criticism, and you're not writing it for them. You're not trying to put your hand up and go, hey, like you're not trying to be like, hey, author senpai, notice me. Unless you're writing like just a purely loving review, that's not what you're doing. And even then it shouldn't be for the author. It should be people who are having a conversation around the book. But social media is this thing where everybody feels like they're kind of next door to you in some sense. Everything is accessible. Right. Everybody is accessible. And particularly, I feel like this is something that happens. There's like a sliding scale of accessibility, because particularly newer creators or smaller creators, or often authors, just because they're not behind a PR team, they're occupying social media as themselves, as opposed to having an intern doing it or being part of a corporation. They're more accessible. So if you have a grievance about a particular book, it's easier to contact that author than it is to say, hey, I've got a grievance with Marvel being full of bullshit. I can't contact Alec Perlmutter because he's the worst and also not on Twitter. So right. There's this frustration. There's this frustration where you're like, okay, who is actually accessible for me to vent to? Who do I think I have a chance of convincing if I have a grievance, if I think this particular comic or this particular movie or book or show, if I think there's something bad about it or problematic about it, or I'm angry about it, do I think I've actually got a chance of contacting somebody involved to make them understand how this has made me feel? And the paradox, the unpleasant paradox there, which I think I talked about on the other Fringe panel I was on the other day, is you are more likely to be able to contact somebody who is marginalized, somebody who is newer in the industry, who's on Twitter as themselves, as opposed to being too far up the food chain to have their own Twitter account anymore, or to be the one running it if they do. And it means that also paradoxically, somebody who is most likely to care about diversity, who is most likely to care about the representations they're putting out into the world, is most likely to listen to the kind of criticism that comes in, but also most likely therefore to get burnt out by it, because they're more likely to get more. So you have these conversations where it's like, oh, this new book by an indie author is really problematic and we're going to yell about it on Twitter and we're going to yell at them on Twitter. And it's like, yes, okay, that might be a legitimate complaint to make about the book, but let's not pretend there isn't also a double standard here when you've got endlessly shitty content coming out from massive Hollywood studios, but you can't yell at them. You can't, and there's also too many people involved. You can't yell at every single person involved in a Marvel movie. You can perhaps try and tag Chris Evans if you're feeling spicy, but it's not going to achieve anything. So yeah, it just becomes this whole mess.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Paul, I would love to hear your thoughts on this one too.
Okay, okay. So to extend a little bit from Foz's history, I think there's always been that creator, fan, writer, critic intersection. Back in the old days when dinosaurs ruled the earth, it was through fanzines, but that was a very slow process. Okay, book comes out, letter comes into the fanzine, next month another letter comes back. It was a slow flame war. Now in the age of Goodreads and in Twitter and other social media, it's much more immediate, much faster, and so things get amplified, accelerated, and become fulminate or fall down. The other thing I want to talk about is relationships with authors. I mean, I'm friends with lots of authors on Twitter, and that makes criticism and reviewing of their work interesting, in that I have to be professional, and yet I want to support the author. I like the author, but I have to also be objective. And I've learned to my cost not to tag authors on with reviews anymore. Just even authors who are my friends, or at least think my friends, because that does blur the boundaries way too much, and then it becomes where's criticism, where's just advocacy and just boostering. And so I've had to learn to disconnect my reviewing from my friendship and boostering of an author, so they're not inextricably and unhappily mixed together. It's something I'm still learning. I lost at least one friendship with an author because I tagged them on a review which I thought was positive. They took it very differently and very badly, and I've not talked to that author since. And so I don't talk. I mean, I gave a near perfect review to Kate Elliott's book Unconquered Sun, which is awesome. You should all read it, by the way. But I did not tag.
I'm reading it now. It's great.
I have it, so like I'm waiting.
I did not tag her on it, even though we're friends, because I didn't want to have. I wanted to pull apart that mix that I've fallen myself into, and be more professional, and less mixed up with everybody else. And I think I've gotten good results as a result. I mean, I can tell an author friend, hey, I've made a review, but if they want to go find it, that's fine. If they can leave it alone, that's up to them. I'm not forcing it in their face like, say, Goodreads does. Like, here, you must read my review now.
Right. So, Leslie, I know you're coming at it from an entirely different atmosphere with like the structure of Hollywood, and then, film just in general is so much more. Well, it's not, I guess not more, but it's just a different kind of collaboration. So how do you handle that distance between creators and audience?
Well, it's difficult. I think what Foz says is correct. There is a paradox, and I to try and put it into a kind of perspective. I remember having an interview with a director and the star for a movie, and the interview went really well. It was really nice, and I was able to take a quick picture of everything and whatnot. And then I was asked to review the film, and the film. It was not particularly to my taste, and you look at the film and you be as professional as possible, and you give the review as best as you can. But there is a reason why certain people just turn around and go, "You do the interview, you do the review," and just two different people, and never the two should mix. I find it really, really difficult. I'm part of a podcast, a kind of new podcast called Hustlers of Culture, where what we do is we look back at certain movies and we look at it from a context of two people of color. And one of the things that we do is a lot of the movies that we look and we kind of contextualize they're always kind of movies that we like and movies that we can extrapolate from. And what we have done on Twitter is we do put at times when the new episode comes out, if there are certain actors and actresses or people within who are on Twitter, they do get added onto a tweet. And what will happen is, this is the thing, whether or not they listen to it, we don't know. We've had in the past directors actually listen to what we've had to say and liked what we've had to say and whatnot. But I don't go out to find people. I've been very, very lucky to have certain people who I've reviewed certain movies from, and they've found me on Twitter, and they've started following me, or I've had kind words and whatnot. But I don't necessarily go out of my way to do this anymore. Mostly because of the climate. But the other thing is, it's not really for them. I mean, for me, I'm a co-host on two different podcasts, and what people seem to do every so often is, you need the reviews in order to go up in charts and all this stuff, or going to iTunes or wherever podcasts may be or whatnot. And the thing is, you need those reviews to kind of go up. And every so often you will get a negative review. And the problem I have with that is, I've never wanted to go out of my way to actually read negative reviews. I don't really look at the positive reviews, so to speak. If someone has something nice to say about something I've done, you take it as a compliment and whatnot. But I've always felt that you do have to kind of keep a certain amount of distance, because you just can't. There's a creation, and it's your creation, and you can have this conversation with people where you're trying to go, well, this is my aim, and this is what I was trying to do. But not everyone is going to see it eye to eye. And I think that still needs to, you still have to try and find ways of keeping that kind of separate. A part of me does feel, as I go on and on, that I don't think I need social media that much anymore, in that way. Or I do, but I don't respond to it in the same way as I used to. And I think one of the reasons why is because of this closeness, and everyone's brushing up against each other. And I think opinions are getting more and more extreme, and I think everyone's getting really territorial. And I think
particularly sorry, I was just going to say, particularly at the moment, because of the pandemic.
Yes,
everybody is stuck inside, and
right.
I mean, I catch myself doom scrolling on Twitter, and I have to stop. But at the same time, I'm an extrovert who isn't getting the human socialization that I'm used to, and social media becomes the next best thing to actually being able to go out and see a person.
Yes,
But there is that sort of paradox to it as well, when it does, like Leslie was saying, when it does become too much, when things start to get too intense, or it's going, like, the conversation is going so fast and people are arguing with each other. Something I find really odd sometimes is that there becomes this double standard for what blocking means. If you block somebody in a conversation, because if somebody blocks you, then it's a sign that you've won the argument somehow. Oh, this so-and-so celebrity blocked me, or so-and-so author blocked me for criticizing them. Therefore, I'm fundamentally right and they're afraid of discourse. But if you block somebody, that's you setting boundaries, natural boundaries around your space and your time and your energy. And it's like, disconnect still seems to exist for a lot of people, where them blocking somebody is completely fine because they're the critic and they need the space and the time. But an author or a creator blocks them, then that's somehow a moral failing on their part. And it's like, look, no, we're all just trying to use the Cursed Bird website as best we can.
Right.
And even if we happen to be wrong on the internet, still we have feelings and boundaries. And past a certain number of Twitter followers, and I've got enough now that if something I say goes slightly viral, then it's like, when will my mentions return from war? They just become unusable, and you get this influx that you can't control. And then it's like, yeah, if I block somebody, it's like, sometimes it's like, look, it's nothing personal, but you have, or mute somebody, it's like, okay, but you have tagged me into a discourse that's going on. Like this happened like a week or two ago. Somebody used a tweet that I had made like several weeks prior as an example, as like a response to something in this completely unrelated Twitter conversation that was like a political argument, and they tagged me and like 4 other people in as a result of sharing this tweet. And it's like, and it was suddenly somebody else's discourse was just taking over my mentions. And I'm like, I'm sorry, I did not ask to be introduced to this conversation. You're arguing about, like, from what I can gather, you're saying that some Republican is shit, and I agree with you, but I didn't ask to be included in this conversation. And now that's all my mentions are for the next 3 days.
You know, I've always tried to like think of it as like, you're walking into someone's house and you're having an argument without them knowing what the argument's about. Like, like, whoa, wait, like you're a guest in my space. Like, don't yell at each other. And it's just, it can be frustrating. And I hear all what you're saying, especially like, I think with every 10,000 followers, like as the number grows up, like everything you tweet becomes that much more volatile. It could be the most innocuous thing. You could tweet a cat picture and it like turns into a thing.
You also have to remember that we're almost we've got this algorithm, whatever it is, and it's not just the fact that you get a following, you get followers, and you get more and more followers, and more people can see your tweets and whatnot. It's also the fact that sometimes what's happening is Twitter will change something in the background, and you'll put something completely, innocuous on as a tweet, and then what will happen is you'll get people just come through and attack. I remember something happening like near the beginning of lockdown, where I was quite frustrated with something that was going on involving some journalism, and I kind of just put an innocuous tweet out there, not to anyone in particular, not tagging anyone, and then I get someone completely out of the blue because of a retweet come through and go, well, why don't you do this then? And it becomes this massive argument. And what I found is like she wasn't following me. She seemed to catch on to something that was retweeted and decided just to bound in and have this really weird argument. It's just like, well, you must have a lot of time today.
It's like somebody like banging open your front door going, and another thing, as if you're already
like a little Kool-Aid man. Like, I'm here. Like.
I mean it's this thing on where I don't mind discourse where I disagree with people or anything else like that, but I'm very, very aware now of who I am and what pushes my buttons, and I found myself being a lot more guarded on Twitter. And I don't know, I'm sure if there's people who's on my feed, they'll look at my feed and go, you absolute liar. But no, I feel like I'm a lot less open now to certain things, because the reason it's 280 characters, and you do not get a sense of the person in those 280 characters. And I'm very much a person that is that feels that if you want to talk to me about certain things, talk to me in person. And I'm finding myself kind of pushing away from a lot of people because they're trying to have this really complex and knotty discourse. in really, really small segments, and it doesn't work. It really doesn't work. Especially when it comes, like I spend so much time on podcasts or a stream like this and everything, trying to pick out the right words and the right things to say, and someone will just come in with just this random 280 tweet, and it's like, okay, there's more to it than that. I'm sorry, there's always more to it than that. And if you want to have a conversation about it, then fine. But no, you just want to kind of get your opinion out there. And I think that's the problem. Is as much as I like how democratic the internet has made everything, there is also this thing on where people value their opinions sometimes too much in certain places. And that's not to say that their opinion isn't valid or anything else like that, but there is something very, very frustrating to see someone with 14 followers turn around and go to said director because they didn't like their movie and just go, well, I know what your film was about. I saw it the other day. Just one guy turning around to Bernard Rose of Candyman and trying to tell him what Candyman is. And Bernard Rose he did that thing in Annie Hall where he just goes, I don't think you know anything of my work. Like, it's that thing where just you can have a reading of something, that's fine, and it's okay to try and have to converse with someone. That's not a problem either, even if it's the person who made it. But do remember that you're talking to the person who made it and their aims, and that's so important. As much as I love someone's opinion, it's like, do remember who you're talking to and why. And it's not just turning around and saying, I have an opinion, I must say it, and it's so important for me to say this thing. It's like,
it's the sort of rule is like, does this need to be said? Does this need to be said by me? Does this need to be said by me now?
Yes.
And so many people fail on the second of those. It's like, maybe it needs to be said, but not by me.
I fully agree, and I don't mean it to come. I don't mean myself to come out quite negatively about that. I do like to say I value other people's opinions, but it is this thing on where I think everything's become so territorial and everything's become so tribalistic, and I always find it quite funny that I'm in these circles where people are talking about stuff like sci-fi and geekdom and fandom, and you'd be surprised how much they have in common with sports fans. And if you mention that, they go, no, we're not, not at all. And it's like, actually,
oh my God,
actually getting that way.
I have this whole. This is like a total sidebar, which I'll be very quick about, but I have come to adulthood without really caring about a sport until the past couple of years, and I've suddenly gotten into North American ice hockey. Okay. And this is which is absurd. It's like fighty ice chess. It's ridiculous and violent, and it makes no sense, and it's weirdly homoerotic, and I love it. But it's this bizarre thing of like, I care about a sport now, and that means I have to, like, well, I don't have to, but my Twitter is like, there are sport journalists and sport people that I follow on Twitter, and the parallels, like you're saying, between the way people care about, oh God, my cat's knocking things over, the way people care about a sport and the way they care about fandom. I mean, they are two fandoms, basically.
Yes.
And the jock nerd dynamic in that respect is not as far apart as Hollywood teen movies would have you believe.
Right. Well, okay, so I did have a couple of more questions, but I actually want to get to some audience questions because there's some really good ones in here. So I'm gonna, if we have time, I'll
bring the cat.
The cat. Additional panelists. All right, so a question from Worlds in Ink. All right, what defines a review? Styles and formats vary. So what do you think is essential to bring up in a review? And I will start with Claire on that one.
Yeah, I was actually on a panel about like the art of the review at official Worldcon, CoNZealand, in their actual program. And we did talk about that quite a bit. So I think it's available for replay now. If anybody's watching and is a Worldcon member, you probably can go and see that. But for me, the building blocks are that you bring up the books, say who it's by and who, like, if it's illustrated, don't forget the illustrator. And then just for me, I like to talk about the premise of the book. And I think for me that it's quite important to talk about, to have a segment that's like, here's what this book is about to me. Because oftentimes you get the blurb for it and the marketing for it, and it goes one way, and then when you read the book, you get like, oh, it feels like it's more about this, or it feels like it's more about that, you know. And for instance, you know, if you take Gideon the Ninth, like the whole marketing is lesbian necromancers in space, and that's wonderful to make you pick up the book. But I think for me in my review, I want to start and say like, hey, actually, you know, Gideon is trying to leave the service of the Ninth House, but then she gets tricked into being the Cavalier for the Ninth House, and they have to go and do this like game to become this elevated position, and it's got all these other houses, and it's quite like gothic and stuff. Like, I like to give a sense of what the book is about, and I think with Gideon it's like a fairly severe extreme example of the marketing having like this one pitch that's too good to not use ever. But I like to have a bit of that before going into critical analysis, because for me, like, a lot of what I do feels like, you know, here I am telling people about stuff I've read, and hopefully if that sounds good, they'll also pick it up too. So that's an important bit for me. And also I find that I'm good at it, so that helps. I'm good at like making people invested in the story of a thing and picking it up.
Big yourself up. I like that.
And you know, you have to be self-aware.
Yep.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, then obviously critical analysis, and I like to, when I prepare for filming a review, I usually have notes rather than the full script. But when I prepare, I like to think about the writing, the characterization, the pacing, you know, like, how fast or slow did I read it? Did it, you know, was there any point in reading the book that I was just kind of like, oh, do I have to, you know, like all that kind of different things that can go. And sometimes a book really annoys me so much that I want to go in and like do a review that is just griping about it. And
Same.
Like, I thought you said name names, and I was like,
no. Same. And it's like there's like a spectrum of review things where it's like, I'm really enjoying a book and I so wanted to say how much I'm enjoying it, but I finish it really quickly. There's sort of a middle ground where sometimes it's like, oh, I'm enjoying the book, but I'm not hugely passionate about it, and the pressure of knowing I have to write a review can make me slow down the reading in some sense. And then that you get right through to the end of, I hate this book so much that I hate reading it now because I need to explain in a lengthy review every sin that it has committed against me personally.
And I find that for me, I mean, that's something that I want to work on. I find that because I can't really, you know, I feel one of the differences between like the writing and the video reviewing, I need to have all my ducks in a row before I sit down and film. And then sometimes I try and it doesn't work out. And there's only so much editing that you can do if you feel like you haven't said all of the things. So I want to be, one of the things that I'm working on being better at is like writing out all the things ahead of time and like spending more time like in the planning stage, because I feel like oftentimes I'm like, oh, I have this like rant review to make, but I don't have enough structure and I don't know what I'm going to say and stuff, and then I end up not making it, and then it feels too late, and then. So there's also process questions, as KJ pointed out in their question. You know, we all have different formats, and that kind of plays into it as well.
Right. All right, so we're almost at 5 minutes. So before we like wrap up, I want to give everybody a chance to kind of plug themselves and like where people can find you on social media and whatnot and so forth. So I will just go around everybody and we'll do that. And if we still have some time after that, we can talk some more because this has been fun. All right, so I will start off with Leslie.
Right, where do I start? Right, so I'm on one podcast called Hustlers of Culture. You can find that wherever podcasts may be found. I'm on another podcast called Fatal Attractions, which is about erotic thrillers, and wherever podcasts may be found on there. You're best to find me on by Googling Afro Film Viewer. That's my blog site. I also write for a website called Set the Tape, as I mentioned earlier. I'm pretty much synonymous with like everywhere or with that name, Afro Film Viewer, on Instagram for my photography and my and on Twitter for just general shower thoughts, really more than anything else.
All right, Paul. I will let you give us your plugs next.
Okay. I'm on Twitter as Prince Justin, as you can see in the thing with a V instead with a U. I write for Nerds of a Feather. I'm a podcaster on Skippy and Fandy, which was a finalist this year for the Hugos. I'm a podcaster on SF Audio. You'll find my stuff on tour.com. Yeah, I mean, you could trip over to the internet and find a review of mine someplace, but I'm most easily best found on Twitter, where I talk about and link to everything I do.
Awesome. Foz.
I'm pretty much everywhere online as @FozMeadows, which is distinctive enough that you don't really have to sort me out from the mass of other Foz Meadowses that don't exist. I also write novels, so my most recent two is a duology from Angry Robot, which is An Accident of Stars, and A Tyranny of Queens, which is a sort of feminist portal fantasy. But yeah, otherwise I'm sort of on Twitter, Tumblr, yelling about various things that sometimes include hockey and mostly is about fandom.
All right, Claire, I will let you finish us up.
Yeah, I've been Claire. My YouTube channel is Claire Rousseau, which is spelled the way it is here. I'm also on Twitter under that same spelling at Claire Rousseau. There are several Claire Rousseaus, but they're all French in France, pretty much. So, you know, if you are seeing an English language Claire Rousseau, it's probably me. And I talk about books and SFF, and I'm probably going to do a video about the awards and what happened.
And I will be watching.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah.
I will be watching.
Obviously, thank you again to our host, Emily.
Thank you, Emily.
Thank you, Emily. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. So it's an honor to have all of you. And I guess shall I close out now? All right. Well, thank you everyone for coming on. Thank you to everyone who's been watching and contributing to the conversation productively. And so again, this has been a panel for CoNZealand Fringe. You can find me on Twitter, of course, at it's a German handle. It's a Sturm und Drang, Sturm und Drang, if you want to do it American with an underscore in between the words. And also, please subscribe to this channel as well if you like my content. So with that, that is our live show.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Yeah, it's been great. Thanks, guys.
Right.
It's good. This is a great conversation.
All right, thank you.